Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today, uncovering the Masterpiece and Whelk Attack. What to say about these couple of episodes? Well, unlike one of the last two, I wouldn't call them forgettable. Well, okay, maybe the Masterpiece fits that definition. Barely anyone on the forum has discussed it, so maybe that means that's true. But I guess that I remember it pretty well, so I don't see it that way. And Whelk Attack, I don't know what it is about this one, but it almost feels nostalgic. Again, that doesn't feel like the right word, which reminds me of what I'd said about, I believe, Buried in Time, but like I said then, nostalgic is the word that I've got, and that's the one I'll be using. But since I don't know what to say about these two episodes here in the introduction, I guess I'll just move on to the part where I say, as always, thank you to everyone tuning into today's reviews. I'm super happy to see so many of y'all here and in the comments, and I want to make sure that y'all never forget that. And now, let's just get right into it. Well, if it isn't the episode that I get mixed up with Fiasco from time to time, the Masterpiece. And yes, despite this mix-up, I still would not call this episode forgettable for me, and let me just say, I think this episode is better than that one, though I guess that doesn't matter right now since I haven't reviewed that episode yet. This episode also reminds me of the other Patty for whatever reason. Well, I could think of a reason, but whatever. I haven't covered that episode either, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, y'all know that I love a good Krusty Krab business practices plot, so this episode already has a conceptual advantage, and I think that the Masterpiece capitalizes on this advantage. Ugh, I need a better word than capitalizes. Anyway, the beginning of this episode is fun, with SpongeBob performing his opening duties so gravely, so seriously, so sophisticatedly. And I love how during all of this, in contrast, Squidward's simply watching a soap opera. He doesn't even have his work hat on. Squidward being an awful employee, or perhaps someone who is good at making use of his time at work, is always hilarious to me. So the Krusty Krab opens for business, but nobody's there, and because Squidward is watching TV, the whole crew sees a commercial for a new restaurant, the Sea Chicken Shack, that seems to be siphoning the Krusty Krabs' customer base. SpongeBob being so eager to spy on the competition is adorable as well, and this brings to mind Spy Buddies. I think that this works to this episode's advantage because that's a pretty positive association given how much I like that episode, and his disguise made me laugh when I first saw it, so that's pretty great. The way he gets kicked out because he's wearing a headband is so funny, and because he gets kicked out, he ends up seeing the giant chicken statue, and I love how this statue ends up captivating SpongeBob too. Great use of the child-adult line that has been oh so neglected lately. By me, not the show. Moving on, once Mr. Krabs gets the idea to have a statue of him put up for kids to play on, the whole part where SpongeBob makes him guess who he's thinking of as the sculptor drags on for quite a bit, and it's boring, so that's definitely a low point for the episode so far. Things get good again once Squidward fully gets on his I'm an artistic genius shtick, which is usually pretty fun to see, and this example is no exception. Him being so conceited like this is fun. And SpongeBob acting as his assistant is cute. The montage of Squidward creating the sculpture was also pretty great and visually interesting, and decently funny where Mr. Krabs is concerned. Not to mention, it's set to a track from the show that I really like, Earl's Revenge. I think this episode, like some others, shows that Squidward is actually pretty talented as an artist, and that his problem is that he's incredibly self-absorbed. Eventually, after this fun montage, we get the reveal of Squidward's masterpiece, and Mr. Krabs' reaction to it is a great visual gag. You know, I actually like the statue that Squidward ends up making here, though it of course is not at all suitable for kids to play on. And when Squidward starts talking about consumerism and all that jazz, I'm reminded of Squid on Strike. I swear, one of these writers is really anti-capitalist, I'm telling you. Well, yeah, I know. The real reason we get moments like this is that it's cool to be anti-capitalist to a certain degree, enough to have the aesthetic of being that way without actually being that way and challenging capitalism. Sounds familiar. When SpongeBob plays on the statue, my mind goes straight to that one moment in Gravity Falls with the hot air balloon from hell. Man, that was a good show. Anyway, wait, I should rewatch it at some point. Okay, anyway, once again, SpongeBob is both hilarious and cute in this episode. Like, I love it. And the ending of this episode is cute as well, and I love me a good pun stinger to close things out. The Masterpiece is a pretty good episode. Sure, it's got a couple of not-so-great moments, but for the most part, it's alright, or really better than alright. Maybe it's not particularly an excellent episode, but it's certainly not bad. And I like how even though it employs the common trio of SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward, this episode shakes things up a bit by 1. Having SpongeBob take on a lesser role, and 2. Using Squidward's status as an artist and intersecting it with normal Krusty Krab shenanigans. These make for some very enjoyable interactions, and I like that a lot. And so that is why I'll be putting this episode in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.6 out of 10. I'm just gonna say it now, Whelk Attack is underrated as hell. Like, no one ever talks about it, and so that's enough right there for me to make that judgment, because people should be talking about this episode. Well, they should be talking about every episode, so I guess that doesn't mean much, does it? But listen, this episode is still underrated because I like it, and no one talks about it, and I think it deserves more attention. The jellyfishing shenanigans that begin this episode are miles better than the ones Trenchbillies, our last episode to begin this way, had to offer, and so Whelk Attack is for sure getting off to a good start with this little bit here. And it's funny because SpongeBob and Patrick crash into each other, just like that episode, except this time there's no obnoxious slow-mo to annoy me, so yay for small victories. Now, one thing I don't like is how when the Whelks show up, SpongeBob and Patrick don't know what they are, and then all tension and pacing is kind of lost for a moment, as the episode spends too much time with SpongeBob and Patrick not losing their shit, and instead just de-sliming themselves. It's just dull and not a funny moment of tension diffusal, like the momentum of the episode just kind of stops here. The tension does eventually come back, though, as SpongeBob and Patrick do finally freak out. Well, mostly SpongeBob, but yeah, it happens. And then, unlike Wormy, these new creatures do actually properly attack the city. It is during this scene of mayhem that we learn that these creatures are dangerous forms of sea snails, known as whelks. And I admit that although this is yet another example of tension not being undermined effectively, I did enjoy Patrick being all like, "I'm not afraid of these whelks," before promptly nearly getting his shit wrecked. Well, okay, I kind of enjoyed it, because in the end it did go on too long for me, and, like, I get why it went on for so long, but that kind of comedy very rarely works for me anyway. I did like how SpongeBob was like, "How'd it go?" when Patrick is very clearly running for his life, though. That was hilarious, and it makes me feel a bit better about the whole joke. Now, one thing I've been noticing a lot is the Krusty Krab being involved in episodes where it isn't strictly necessary, and Whelk Attack is one of those episodes. And so, as such, SpongeBob and Patrick run to the Krusty Krab in this flight for their life. I guess I should be clear that I'm not bothered by this trend. I just feel like I gotta admit that the Krusty Krab makes a lot of appearances in episodes it has no real business being in. Anyway, I loved the sequence of SpongeBob explaining to Mr. Krabs what was going on. Like, the perspective shot there, mimicking Mr. Krabs' field of view, was super interesting, and I don't think we've seen anything quite like that in this show before, other than maybe a quick shot or two. But definitely nothing that lasted as long as this did. It stands out, since normally characters do not directly face the camera, not to mention the forced 3D-esque perspective. The animation of this episode was just pretty good and energetic in general. I liked it. We then get the reveal that, yeah, these whelks that the characters have been dealing with so far, yeah, they're not shit compared to what's coming, which is a giant mama whelk that ends up eating Mr. Krabs faster than Jean Jacket was sucking up the attendees of the Star Lasso experience in Nope. Somehow, SpongeBob and Patrick manage to make it out of this situation alive, and they run to Sandy's place. And this is, of course, a huge win for me. This is definitely Sandy's best appearance in a while, and this is for a variety of reasons, one of them being that it combines her love of thrills and of science. I loved the bit a little later when SpongeBob and Patrick are debating sacrificing themselves for the group, like it's a real great exhibit of their friendship. Of course, this point ends up being moot, as SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy all end up being eaten anyway. Thankfully for them, and for everyone else, the Krusty Krab is perfectly intact in the stomach of the Mama Whelk, and Sandy finds out that the reason why the Whelks are rampaging like this is because they're sick. Yeah, sure, why not? And so SpongeBob saves the day with two great callbacks in one. First to the beginning of the episode with him being a sponge, and secondly to Suds, which was a very surprising thing to reference, but I love it. And once the day is saved and the gang, as in the Big Five, are all together unharmed, and a whelk sneezes in Squidward's face, we get an everybody laughs ending, which is a trope that I, for one, love. Whelk Attack is an episode that I enjoyed a whole lot, and as I said before, I consider it to be criminally underrated. And, I get why, like, it's a great episode, but I also don't believe that there's a lot here that other people would think is special. Like, yes, I think it's a great Sandy appearance, and I also think it's one of the few episodes that really does well at having multiple sets of characters in it, though we did not get much crossover interaction. But those are things that only matter to some people, like me. They don't seem to matter as much to the general fandom at large, and that's okay. Like, I can see why people overlook this episode, but that's just not me. And so that's why this episode is being placed in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this review with some closing thoughts of mine. Just kind of like the last episode, I don't really have that many. I guess one thing is not really related to these episodes at all, but I will potentially, did I even say that word right? I will potentially not have any reviews next week. I'll be busy during the day that I normally put all of the reviews together, or put the videos together, and so I've yet to figure out what my next week is going to look like to see if I can fit that in or not. And so I guess by the time this video comes out, I'll know. So either way, you'll know within a few days whether or not there will be videos next week. And yeah, I think that's about it. I guess I'll just go ahead and end things here, and I will see you guys in the next review.